The silk robe slipped from Mara's hands and hit the ballroom floor. Across the aisle, Nico Valenti was staring straight at her pregnant belly. Mara? Her hand flew to her stomach. Nico did not move. How far along are you? Mara grabbed her bag. 23 weeks. His eyes sharpened. She should have stopped there. With triplets. For once, Nico Valenti had no answer ready. 3? Yes. His gaze dropped again. 23 weeks. 3 babies. 5 months since the courthouse. Mara saw him do the math. Are they mine? Her grip tightened around the strap of her bag. I'm leaving. Nico took one step toward her. Mara stepped back. He stopped. I've been looking for you. I know. His eyes narrowed. You knew? You had people asking about me from South Street to Ardmore. I never put your name in public. You didn't have to. People hear Valenti and start volunteering. He did not deny it. Around them, the Briar Ballroom kept moving. Buyers talked over one another, hangers clicked against garment racks, and 2 hotel security men had quietly cleared the aisle without Nico asking. Mara had changed apartments twice, stopped using the credit card Graham Caldwell once paid for, taken freelance jobs under Quinn instead of Caldwell, kept cash behind her sewing machine and told only 3 people where she slept. None of it had mattered. Nico's eyes stayed on her. You're my wife. Mara laughed once, without humor. You had a wife for less than a night. His face tightened. 5 months earlier, Graham Caldwell had called Mara to the family's riverfront office and told her the business was in trouble. He had said it was urgent. He had not said Nico Valenti would be waiting there. Mara walked into the conference room and found Graham, Elise, Paige, 2 attorneys, and Nico seated around the long table. Through the windows behind them, Caldwell trucks sat idle in the yard. What is this? Graham pointed to the empty chair beside him. Sit down. I'll stand. One of the attorneys slid a folder toward her. The first page was a marriage license application. Mara stared at it. No. Read the rest. I don't need to. Graham's face hardened. Caldwell Freight has 48 hours. Until what? Until the bank takes the riverfront yards. Mara looked through the glass at the silent trucks, then at Nico. And marrying me stops that? Nico answered quietly. My name keeps your trucks moving and your creditors patient. That sounds like a threat. It is a fact. Mara turned back to Graham. Why me? He hesitated. That frightened her more than the debt. Why me? The Quinn Trust still owns part of the riverfront property. Mara stared at him. What trust? Nobody answered. Her voice dropped. You told me my parents left almost nothing. Graham glanced at his attorney. Mara saw it. Oh my God. Mara, how much is left? The cash was mostly used for your care. The property interest is different. My care. This is not the time. It feels exactly like the time. Elise reached for her hand. Mara pulled away. Mara, please. We gave you a home when you had nowhere else to go. We are asking you to help us keep ours. The words hurt because Elise sounded sincere. Mara looked at Paige. You knew too? Paige did not answer. Outside, a forklift backed through the yard, its warning beep repeating every few seconds. Nico broke the silence. You should have your own lawyer. Graham snapped. We don't have time. Mara looked at Nico. Yet you're still willing to sign. I'm willing to sign if you sign. It was not rescue. Nico wanted the alliance too. At least he was not pretending otherwise. Graham reminded her that 80 people worked in the Caldwell yards and warehouses. 80 paychecks. 80 families. By the time he finished, saying no longer sounded like refusing a marriage. It sounded like choosing who lost their jobs. By 6 that evening, Mara was standing in a private judge's chambers in Center City, wearing the same navy dress she had worn to work. On the drive there, Elise sat beside her in the back seat. You can still say no, she whispered. Mara turned to her. Can I? Elise opened her mouth, then closed it again. At the courthouse, Mara made Graham wait outside while she called Lena Ortiz, a lawyer she had used once for a freelance dispute. Lena could not get there in time, but she made Mara photograph every page and send it before signing. This is a terrible way to get married, Lena said. I noticed. If anybody threatens you, walk. Mara looked through the glass at Graham pacing the hall. Nobody has to threaten me. They just keep telling me what happens to everyone else if I say no. Lena was quiet. That is still pressure. I know. Mara signed anyway, not because she had changed her mind, because everyone around her had spent hours making refusal feel like a disaster she alone would cause. Nico signed after her. That night at the Valenti estate, he brought her to a guest suite and stopped at the door. You can lock it. How generous. His jaw tightened. I didn't ask Graham to corner you like that. You still married me. Yes. Because you wanted the riverfront. Because my family wanted the alliance and I agreed to it. Same answer. Nico turned toward the hall. Mara watched him reach the door. All day, someone else had decided what she owed, what she should sign, where she should go, and what would happen if she refused. Wait, Nico looked back. Mara hated that her voice shook. I don't want another decision made for me tonight. His expression changed. Then don't make one. He started toward the door again. Stay. Nico did not move. Mara crossed the room and kissed him. He caught her shoulders and pulled back enough to look at her. Mara? I know what I'm doing. Are you sure? She was angry, hurt, still furious with him. But this choice was hers, yes. Hours later, Nico slept beside her. Mara lay awake staring at the ceiling. Choosing one thing had not changed the marriage certificate downstairs. It had not changed Graham's hidden trust, the trucks in the yard, or the fact that everyone seemed to know where her life was going before she did. At 4:17 a.m., she got dressed, took one suitcase and $1,840 in cash and left through the kitchen entrance. Back in the Briar ballroom, Nico was still watching her. 23 weeks, triplets, one night together. His eyes lifted to hers. How long have you known? 9 weeks, Mara said, and you never called me. Mara looked at him. Why would I? Because there are 3 children involved. You didn't know they existed. His jaw tightened. Have you done paternity testing? No. Why? Because I was busy trying to stay pregnant. That stopped him. Mara lowered her voice. Triplets are high risk. I have appointments every 2 weeks. I get tired walking across a grocery store. Proving something to you wasn't my first priority. Nico looked at her for a moment. I'm not asking you to prove anything today. You asked if they were yours before you asked if I was okay. His face changed. Mara had not meant the sentence to sound hurt. It did. You're right, he said. That quiet answer unsettled her more than an argument would have. A tight pressure pulled across her lower abdomen. Mara stopped talking and pressed one hand beneath her belly. Nico moved instinctively. Don't. He stopped. What do you need? A chair. He found one without arguing, then brought her water. The tightening eased after a minute. Braxton Hicks, Mara said. My doctor knows. You've been standing here all day. 6 hours. That's too long. Thank you, Dr. Valenti. He gave her a look and let it go. One of the babies kicked hard against her left side. Mara flinched. Nico noticed. What? Movement. Another kick came higher, then a smaller one on the right. Nico stared at her belly. Mara looked at his hand, still at his side. If you want to feel, ask. His eyes lifted. Do you want me to? Mara nodded once. Nico placed his palm lightly against the side of her sweater. A baby kicked almost immediately. His face changed. That one has timing, Mara said. Another movement hit his hand. Before either of them could say anything, Caterina Valenti's voice came from behind them. 3? Mara turned. Caterina stood beside Elias Mercer, silver hair perfectly cut, black coat buttoned to the throat. She looked from Mara to Nico and back again. Triplets? Yes, Caterina exhaled. Pack your things. No, the older woman blinked. Excuse me, I'm not moving into your house because Nico found me in a ballroom. Caterina looked at her grandson. You searched for 5 months. Say something. Nico took his hand away from Mara's stomach. She said no. Caterina's expression sharpened. And I heard her. Mara looked at him. Caterina muttered something in Italian. Mara caught one word. Nipoti. Grandchildren. Nona, Nico said. What? You want me to pretend I am calm? You disappear from your own wedding. She vanishes for 5 months, and now she appears carrying 3 babies. They are not confirmed to be mine. Caterina looked personally offended by uncertainty. Mara stood carefully. Even if they are, They're not a Valenti acquisition. Katerina's gaze snapped to her. Elias studied the ceiling. Nico ignored both of them. Come to your doctor tomorrow. No, your doctor, your hospital. I wait outside unless you invite me in. Mara watched him. And after that? I have an agreement drafted. Her body went tense. Absolutely not. Not another marriage contract, a living arrangement. I'm already living somewhere, in a third-floor walk-up with one exit. Mara stared at him. You found my apartment. I found you today. Elias found the lease an hour ago. That is exactly why I don't want to live with you. Nico took the hit. Separate rooms, your doctor, your work, your money, your privacy. If the babies are mine, I support them whether you stay married to me or not. And if they aren't? I still cover the pregnancy costs until we know. Katerina started to object. Nico turned his head. Nona. She stopped. Mara had watched Katerina silence 3 grown men with a look. Nico had just done the same to her. I choose the lawyer, Mara said. Yes. Not someone your family recommends? Yes. If I don't like it, I walk. Nico's answer took a beat. Then you walk. Mara picked up her bag. Send it tomorrow. Nico stepped aside, leaving the path to the doors open. Mara walked out, knowing the babies might be Nico Valenti's. If she went back into his world, she would need rules strong enough to survive it. The agreement arrived at 8:12 the next morning. Mara forwarded it unopened to Lena Ortiz, the lawyer who had once forced a boutique hotel to pay Mara for a design package it tried to use for free. Lena called 20 minutes later. Your husband has expensive attorneys. I noticed. He also appears to be trying very hard not to look like a kidnapper. That is less comforting than you think. The draft required Mara to live at the Valenti estate until 30 days after delivery. In return, she kept control of all medical decisions, could continue working with her doctor's approval, had private rooms and finances, and was free to leave the property without permission. There was no automatic custody transfer. Lena found 3 clauses she disliked. Mara found 7. One clause allowed Valenti security to enter Mara's rooms if they believed she was in medical danger. Too broad, Lena said. Nico's attorney replied, triplet pregnancies can deteriorate quickly. Then doctors make medical decisions, Mara said. Not armed men outside my bedroom. Another clause required a driver after dark. Mara crossed it out. Nico put it back. They argued over that one for 12 minutes before settling on transportation being offered, not required unless Mara's physician placed her on restricted activity. The negotiation exhausted her, but she refused to rush. Every time someone said a clause was standard, she asked standard for whom. By the 3rd draft, Nico stopped trying to hurry her. By evening, they had sent the draft back twice. At 7:40 p.m., Mara sat across from Nico in Lena's office. No access to my phone, Mara said. Fine. No access to medical records without written consent. Fine. No security report about what I eat, who I meet, or where I shop. Nico frowned. If you disappear, I'm allowed to go to a pharmacy without your intelligence network writing a memo. Lena hid a smile. Nico leaned back. Emergency only. Real emergency. Fine. They added separate bedrooms, no obligation to attend family events, and no physical contact without consent. Then Mara closed the contract. One more thing. Nico's attorney picked up his pen. Not for the paper, Mara said. She looked at Nico. If something affects me or the babies, you tell me. His expression became more careful. No deciding, I'm better off not knowing. No half answer, because you think the full answer will upset me. That can be complicated in my world. Then keep your world away from me. Silence stretched across the table. Finally, Nico nodded. Anything that directly affects you or the children, I tell you. Mara held his eyes. I'm going to remember you said that. I expect you to. She signed. The Valenti estate was 30 minutes outside the city, behind iron gates and enough security cameras to make Mara feel as if the house was watching before she stepped inside. Katerina met her in the front hall. You'll take the east suite. I need a lock. Nico doesn't have a key to. Katerina looked at her grandson. You married this woman willingly? Nico ignored the question. She gets the lock. Later, while Mara unpacked, Elias brought her a small card with 3 phone numbers: estate security, medical transport, and me. I'm not calling you every time I want to leave. That isn't what it's for. What is it for? In case somebody outside this house decides your marriage makes you useful. Mara stared at him. Elias did not smile. Does that happen often? Enough that I'm giving you the card. Later, while Mara unpacked, voices carried from downstairs. She followed them as far as the upper landing. 3 men stood in Nico's library. One had a split lip. Another wore the jacket of a port foreman. Papers and a cash ledger sat on the table. The other crew sent word, the foreman said. They want half the night loading at Pier 12. Nico did not raise his voice. They get nothing on our side of the river. Move the Caldwell drivers to Pier 9 for a week. Pay anyone who loses a shift. Nobody starts a fight over this. The injured man said, And if they do? Then you call Elias before you do something stupid. Mara stepped back before anyone saw her. The corporate side of Valenti Meridian had offices, quarterly reports, and legal counsel. This was the other side, the one that settled problems at the river before they reached a courtroom. That night, a tray arrived at Mara's room without her asking. Soup, bread, fruit. Nico stood behind the staff member. You didn't eat lunch. Mara's stomach tightened. How do you know? The driver mentioned it to Elias. And Elias told you? Yes. Mara looked at the food, then at him. This is what I meant. Nico started to explain, then stopped. He turned to the staff member. Take it back. I am hungry, Mara said. He looked at her. That's not the point. No. Mara waited. Nico tried again. Would you like dinner sent up? Yes. The soup? The soup is fine. He nodded. I'll tell Elias not to report things like that unless it's an actual emergency. When he left, Mara locked her bedroom door. The click was small, but she slept better hearing it. In a house where Nico Valenti could make trucks reappear and dock crews change shifts with a phone call, there was still one door he could not open unless Mara let him. 4 days later, Mara told Nico she was going back to work. He looked up from his coffee. Your doctor cleared that? She cleared 6-hour days if I take breaks. You want to freelance from the estate? I want to work around people who don't call you sir. Nico considered that. Meridian Atelier. Mara shook her head. I am not walking into your company as your pregnant wife and getting handed a fake job. What would make it real? A real opening. A real salary. A manager who can reject me. Nico looked genuinely offended by the last part. That expression is exactly why I'm insisting. I can arrange an interview. No. HR can arrange an interview because I apply to an open role. You plan to make me watch you fill out an online form for a company I own. If you're lucky. He leaned back in his chair. What if they reject you? Then I get rejected. Nico studied her for a moment as if the concept were personally unreasonable. Mara smiled. This is how normal people live. I've heard rumors. Then don't. She frowned. Apply, he said. Use Quinn. Interview like everyone else. And you don't call HR. His mouth twitched. You make everything difficult. I make it mine. 9 days later, after 2 interviews and a design test, Mara got a 6-month assistant designer contract at Meridian Atelier. For the test, she had adapted an old leaf embroidery study from one of her freelance sketchbooks. She scanned the original page, uploaded it with the construction notes, and kept the submission email because she kept everything. No private office, no special title. She loved the ugly desk they gave her near the sample room. Her neighbor was Jules, a fast-talking designer who showed her which printer jammed, where the good scissors were hidden, and which manager to avoid before coffee. The first week was harder than Mara expected. Her lower back hurt by 3 every afternoon. She hated asking Jules to lift sample boxes she would normally carry herself. She also hated the way a few employees glanced at her stomach and then at her temporary contract, as if trying to work out what mistake HR had made. Nobody knew she could call Nico Valenti from her desk, and Mara intended to keep it that way. When a senior designer rejected one of Mara's color stories, Mara went back to the board and rebuilt it, instead of wondering whether Nico could fix the problem. By Friday, She had earned one compliment from the same designer. It meant more to her than the East Suite, the driver, and every expensive thing Katerina had tried to send upstairs combined. At noon, the room changed. People straightened when Vivienne Hale walked onto the floor. She was the executive creative director, tall, polished, and very good at what she did. Jules leaned closer. Old Philadelphia money. Hale Maritime Security. Mara knew the name. The Hales had guarded river terminals for decades. Depending on who told the story, they were either respected contractors or the Valenti family's oldest useful allies. Katerina wanted her to marry Nico, Jules added. That was the rumor anyway. Valenti and Hale together would have ended a lot of dock problems. Mara kept her face neutral. Office gossip is very efficient here. Vivienne stopped beside Mara's board. This yours? Yes. She studied a wrap construction. Narrow the internal tie half an inch, it will sit flatter. Mara looked at the sketch. Vivienne was right. I'll try it. A finance manager approached. Miss Hale, Mr. Valenti moved your meeting to 4:30. He won't make 4:30, Vivienne said. He has board prep at 5 and Katerina at 6. Give me 3:15. And don't put espresso in the room after 2, unless you want him awake all night complaining about it. The man nodded and left. Mara kept her eyes on her board. Of course, a senior executive knew Nico's schedule. Vivienne looked at Mara's bare left hand. You're settling in? So far. Good. She started away, then stopped. He hasn't told you about me? Mara looked up. Told me what? Vivienne's expression was almost kind. Nothing. She walked away. Mara told herself it was none of her business. She almost believed it. By the end of Mara's first week at Meridian, the estate had developed a strange routine around her. Katerina ate breakfast at 7 and criticized anyone who arrived at 7:02. Elias appeared and disappeared at all hours. Nico often came home after Mara was already in her suite, though twice she found him in the kitchen close to midnight eating cold pasta directly from the container. The first time, she stared. What? I expected a Mafia empire to provide plates. It does. I chose not to use one. The second time, she handed him a fork before he asked. By then, Nico had also stopped checking the edges of her day. He no longer asked what time she would be home or had Elias appear when she worked 15 minutes late. He knew where she was. The building belonged to him. But he had stopped making that knowledge feel like surveillance. Mara noticed. She did not tell him. On Friday morning, Nico saw her limping into the kitchen. Hip, left. Doctor today? Mara paused. You remembered. You told me Tuesday. At 26 weeks with triplets, every ultrasound felt less routine than the last. Nico picked up his coat. Mara looked at him. Are you assuming you're coming? No. Then why the coat? Because I hoped you'd ask. That answer made her uncomfortable, in a way his orders never did. You wait in the lobby unless I say otherwise. All right. At the maternal-fetal medicine clinic, Nico sat beside her with his phone face down and did something Mara had never seen him do anywhere else. He waited. A little boy in the opposite chair dropped a toy truck near Nico's shoe. Nico picked it up and handed it back without looking at the child's mother, who had gone pale after recognizing him. Thank you, she said. Nico nodded. After she moved farther down the waiting room, Mara leaned toward him. She knows who you are. Probably. She looked scared. Nico did not pretend otherwise. Probably. Mara studied him. Does that bother you? Sometimes. That was all he gave her, but it was more honest than a denial. No calls, no complaints, no sending Elias to ask why they were 12 minutes behind schedule. When the nurse called Mara's name, she stood. Nico stood too, but stayed where he was. Mara looked at him. He can come. Inside, the technician found baby A first, then B, then C. 3 heads, 3 spines, 3 fast heartbeats filling the dark room one after another. Mara watched the monitor until she realized Nico was watching it just as hard. Baby C is hiding again, the technician said. He always does, Mara replied. Nico looked at her. You can tell? Sometimes. The technician spent nearly 40 minutes measuring each baby. Baby B had 1 foot pressed against baby A's side. Baby C refused to show his face and rolled away every time the probe found him. Nico asked almost no questions until the technician left to get the doctor. Then he said, "Are you scared every time?" Mara looked at the dark monitor. Yes, he nodded once. No promise that everything would be fine. No speech about Valenti doctors or money. He simply stayed in the chair. The doctor reviewed the measurements and told Mara all 3 babies were growing appropriately. Then she cut Mara's workday to 6 hours. Mara groaned. Nico coughed into his fist. She turned. "Don't." I said nothing. You enjoyed it loudly. On the elevator down, one of the babies kicked. Nico glanced at her stomach. "See?" Mara laughed before she could stop herself. "Probably." The elevator reached the lobby. Mara did not move right away. "You can come to the next appointment. If you want me there." "I just said you can." "That's different." She looked at him. He was right, and she hated that he was right. "I want you there." Nico nodded. "All right." That evening, he brought her sketchbook to her suite after she left it in the car. He put it on the coffee table and turned to go. "Wait," Mara said. Nico stopped. She moved her legs to make room on the sofa. "You can stay." He sat at the other end. Mara worked on sketches while an old documentary played quietly on television. For 20 minutes, nothing important happened. Mara realized she was no longer measuring the distance to the door every time Nico entered a room. His phone vibrated twice inside his jacket. He ignored it. Mara kept drawing. For the first time since the wedding, she thought maybe he was actually learning how to be someone she could trust. That thought frightened her enough that she put her pencil down. Nico looked over. "What?" "Nothing." "You made a face." "I'm allowed to have a face." "That one usually means you're arguing with me in your head." Mara picked the pencil up again. "Go back to the documentary." He did. The silence stayed comfortable. 3 days later, Mara was still at Meridian after 8 because a buyer presentation had been moved to the next morning. Nico texted at 6:14. "Dinner?" Mara replied. "Working. 6 hours. I took lunch." "That isn't how hours work." She smiled at the screen. A minute later, another message came. "Hale meeting at the Briar. I'll be late." Mara glanced across the floor. Vivienne's office was already empty. She put the phone down and kept working. At 8:30, Mara packed her laptop and reached for the black sample case she needed for the morning presentation. It was gone. A production assistant remembered Vivienne taking it after the afternoon review. She had needed the swatches for the Hale meeting at the Briar. Mara called Vivienne twice. No answer. The case held 6 custom-dyed samples the buyer had specifically requested. Waiting until morning meant gambling that Vivienne would arrive before the presentation. Mara hated gambling with work. On the ride to the Briar, she called once more. Voicemail. The concierge downstairs typed her name, saw something on his screen, and nearly called her Mrs. Valenti before she stopped him. He gave her access to the executive floor. The hallway was quiet. Mara knew Nico kept a private suite there for late meetings. She saw light under the door. Then she heard Vivienne laugh. Not loud, close. Mara stopped. The suite door opened. Vivienne stepped into the hallway with one shoe in her hand. Her hair was down. She was fastening an earring. For a second, neither woman moved. Then Mara looked past her. Nico stood inside in a white shirt with the collar open. His jacket was gone. His tie lay across a chair. 2 glasses sat on the table. Mara's body went cold before her thoughts caught up. The ultrasound room came back first. 3 heartbeats. Nico sitting against the wall because she had asked him to. Then the sofa. His phone vibrating inside his jacket while she kept drawing. She had not asked who was calling, because she had started to trust him. "Mara, I came for my sample case." Vivienne glanced toward a chair. The case sat beside it. "I took it by mistake." "Okay." Mara walked in far enough to pick it up. Nico came toward her. "Don't." He stopped. Mara carried the case into the hallway and pressed the elevator button. Nico followed, but stayed several feet away. "Was this after the ultrasound?" He said nothing. Mara kept her eyes on the elevator doors. "Nico?" "Yes." "Tonight?" "Yes." Her thumb pressed the call button again, although it was already lit. "Did you sleep with her?" "Yes." "How many times?" "Once." Mara nodded as if he had given her a number for an invoice. "Once is enough." Mara? What? He stopped talking. She finally turned. The meeting was real? Yes. And then, Nico looked toward the suite. The meeting ended. She stayed. Mara waited. I let her. He did not add an excuse. Mara wished he had given her something easier to hate. Did she know I was living with you? Yes. Did you know I wanted you at my next appointment when you came here tonight? His face tightened. Yes. The elevator arrived. Nico said, I told myself our marriage started as an arrangement. Don't. I'm not saying that makes this okay. You decided what our marriage meant when it was convenient for you. He went quiet. Mara stepped into the elevator. You promised me one thing. If something affected me, you would tell me. I know, and you didn't. No. The doors closed. Back at the estate, Katerina saw Mara cross the front hall. What happened? Not tonight. Katerina looked toward the door behind her, perhaps expecting Nico. Mara kept walking. Inside her suite, she put the sample case on the floor and stared at it. 6 pieces of silk had sent her to the hotel. She sat on the edge of the bed until all 3 babies moved. One moved low, another high, and the third kicked hard enough to make her catch her breath. Nico knocked once at 11:06. I'm not coming in, he said through the door. I'm sorry. Mara did not answer. The next morning, she put their agreement on the kitchen island. We follow this now. Nico looked at the papers. All right, I'm staying because moving again at 26 weeks with triplets would be stupid. My doctor stays, my job stays, the medical arrangement stays. All right, you don't come to my next appointment. His jaw tightened. All right, you don't come into my rooms unless I ask, and stop asking me to dinner. That answer took longer. All right. Mara picked up her bag. You didn't sleep, Nico said. Neither did you. Mara. She stopped at the doorway. Please don't make me manage your guilt too. He said nothing. Katerina was waiting in the hall. Mara almost walked past her. The older woman said, I wanted the Hale alliance once. Mara stopped. Then you got what you wanted. No. Katerina's voice was sharp enough to make Mara look at her. I wanted a marriage between 2 families years ago. He married you. What he did last night was his choice. Mara studied her. You knew? Not until he came home. Mara adjusted the strap of her bag. I'm not asking you to take my side. I know. Katerina stepped aside. At 8:07, Mara walked onto the 17th floor of Meridian Atelier. Vivienne was already there. She took one step toward Mara. Mara put down her bag. Don't. Vivienne stopped. Mara sat at her desk, opened her sketchbook, and went to work. Seeing Vivienne every day was harder than Mara expected. A shoe in one hand, an earring, Nico's open collar, 2 glasses. Her mind kept the smallest details. At the morning design review, Vivienne rejected a waistband she had approved 2 days earlier. What changed? Mara asked. My opinion. Based on what? It needs more structure. For sleepwear? Then solve structure and comfort. Mara wrote the note down. The criticism was usable. The tone was not. Later that morning, a buyer from Chicago asked who had developed Mara's wrap construction. Vivienne answered before Mara could. Assistant design team. The buyer looked at the board again. Who specifically? Mara raised her hand slightly. The woman smiled. Can you present the revision Monday? I want the person who built it in the room. Of course. Mara saw Vivienne's expression change for less than a second. After the meeting, Mara found Vivienne alone in the conference room. If you have a problem with my work, tell me. I just did. No, you use the work to have a problem with me. Vivienne set down her tablet. You think everything is about what happened at the Briar? I think you knew who I was before my first day. Vivienne looked away for a fraction of a second. You did? Yes, and you still slept with him. Vivienne's face hardened. I was in his life years before you. So, you disappeared. That was between Nico and me. Vivienne gave a bitter laugh. You're acting like you were cheated on in a real marriage. Mara went still. Vivienne seemed to regret the sentence as soon as it was out. Mara walked closer. You don't owe me loyalty, but if you use this job to punish me for something he chose to do, then this stops being personal. It becomes a work problem. She opened the door. Vivienne said, You think one buyer asking for you changes your position here? Mara looked back. No, but apparently you do. She left. At lunch, Mara's phone rang from an unknown Philadelphia number. Paige. What do you want? Mara asked. Dad's accounts are frozen. That sounds like Dad's problem. It's connected to the Quinn estate. Mara stopped walking. My parents? I found a box in his office. Old statements. Your name is on them. Mara stepped into an empty hallway. Read me one. Paige read a date from 3 months after Mara's mother died, then an amount large enough to make Mara grip the wall. Where did it go? Caldwell Development Holdings. Mara closed her eyes. Graham had spent years reminding her what the Caldwells paid to raise her. Send me photographs of everything. Dad will lose his mind. Then don't tell him. Paige sent the first photographs in groups of 10. Mara opened them at her desk, after most of the floor had emptied. One statement listed a custodial account in her mother's name. Another showed a transfer into Caldwell Development. A third contained a notation for Paige's private school tuition. Mara stared at that line for a long time. She did not blame Paige for going to school. She blamed the people who had spent years turning every meal, book, and tuition payment into proof that Mara owed them. By evening, Mara had bank statements, trust documents, and checks bearing Graham's signature. She sent every image to Lena. The marriage arrangement at the Riverfront office looked different now. Graham had needed Mara's signature because the Quinn Trust still touched the property. He had also needed her not to ask why. Mara opened a blank document. At the top she typed 3 headings: dates, transfers, signatures. Then she started filling them in. By Monday, Lena had 63 photographs from Paige and a forensic accountant looking through them. Mara forced herself to focus on Meridian. The Chicago buyer returned for the winter capsule review and asked Mara to present the wrap herself. Mara stood beside the board with swollen ankles and a pencil tucked behind one ear, explaining why she had changed the internal structure without making the garment feel stiff. When she finished, the buyer touched the waistband and nodded. Keep her on the piece. Vivienne smiled professionally. Of course. 20 minutes later, 2 Meridian security officers arrived at Mara's desk. Mara Quinn? Yes. We need to inspect your bag. A restricted development prototype is missing. Mara looked toward Vivienne. What am I accused of? We received a report that company property may have been removed from the concept archive. Mara stepped away from her tote. Open it. The officer removed her wallet, notebook, water bottle, and cardigan. Then a black garment bag Mara had never seen. Inside was a burgundy silk robe with unfinished gold embroidery. Conversation died around them. Vivienne approached from the review area. That piece should not be on this floor. Mara stared at the embroidery. 3 leaf shapes. The third shortened near the shoulder. An asymmetrical break in the line. She knew it, not because she had seen the robe, because she had drawn the pattern years ago. Mara looked at the tag inside the garment. A Meridian concept code. A date from the week she had applied for the job. Her head came up. Who opened this project? Vivienne's expression barely shifted. It's an internal concept. That isn't what I asked. Mara went to her desk and pulled out the old brown sketchbook she had used for her application test. She opened it to the original leaf study. Then she opened the submission folder on her phone. The scan, the construction notes, the email confirming Meridian received the design test. Same motif, same shortened third leaf, same break in the line. This was in my application package. Jules leaned over the sketchbook. That's exact. Vivienne folded her arms. Candidate submissions become part of the hiring record. That does not prove you didn't take the prototype. No, Mara said. It proves somebody inside Meridian used my application to make one. She looked at security. Check when the concept file was created. Compare it to the timestamp on my design test. Then pull archive access and the cameras around my desk and the review rooms. Vivienne said, You don't have authority to order an investigation. Mara looked at the officer. I'm asking you to preserve evidence in an accusation against me. The female officer nodded. We can do that. The elevator opened. Nico stepped onto the floor with Elias. Several people straightened instinctively. Mara knew what could happen next. One sentence from Nico and the investigation would stop being an HR matter. His gaze moved from Mara to the garment and then to Vivienne. What happened? I'm handling it, Mara said. Nico looked at her. Then he stepped back. Security pulled the first records within minutes. The concept file had been created the morning after Mara submitted her design test. The initial upload came from an executive creative account assigned to Vivienne's department. Vivienne's face tightened. That account is used by my team. Exactly, Mara said. The archive log showed Vivienne's senior assistant had checked out the prototype at 8:11 that morning. The corridor camera showed the assistant carrying the garment bag into Conference C at 8:26. At 8:31, she came out carrying Mara's black sample case. There was no camera inside the conference room. For a few seconds, the assistant said nothing. Then the female security officer asked, "Why did you have Miss Quinn's case?" The assistant looked at Vivienne. Vivienne said, "Answer the question." The woman's face crumpled. "You told me to put the archive piece with her samples." Vivienne went pale. "I told you to return it." "No. You said if the buyer thought she took a restricted concept, she'd be off the capsule before Monday." The room went silent. Vivienne stared at her. The assistant kept talking now that she had started. "You said nobody would believe an assistant designer over the archive record." Nico moved. Mara lifted one hand without looking at him. He stopped. Mara turned to security. "Copy my sketchbook in front of me. Preserve the application file, the concept history, the badge logs, and the corridor footage." "Understood." Vivienne gave a short, broken laugh. "You really want to pretend none of this is because of him?" Mara turned. Vivienne looked around the floor. "The woman you all know as Mara Quinn is Mara Valenti." Nobody moved. "She's his wife." The atmosphere changed instantly. A woman who had offered Mara half a sandwich the week before sat straighter. Someone near the sample room whispered, "Oh my God." The security officer who had searched Mara's bag looked toward Nico, and then quickly away. Mara hated the change more than the accusation. She had wanted her work judged before her last name entered the room. It already had been. The buyer had asked for her. The sketchbook had been hers. The timestamps had been hers. Vivienne could reveal the marriage, but she could not move any of those things backward. Nico started to speak. Mara shook her head. Her wrap was still pinned to the review board. She picked up her pencil. "We still have a 2 o'clock review," she said to Jules. Jules blinked. Then she pulled out the chair beside Mara. "Yeah, we do." By late afternoon, Vivienne and her assistant had been suspended pending investigation. Security preserved the footage. IT locked the relevant design files. HR started interviews. Nico found Mara alone in a conference room. Through the glass, Elias was speaking to Meridian Security. 2 men from the private side of the Valenti organization stood near the elevators. "Send them home," Mara said. Nico followed her eyes. "They're here in case. Send them home." He looked at her for a moment, then opened the door. "Elias," that was all it took. The 2 men left. Nico came back inside. "Vivienne is finished here." "The investigation isn't." "I know what she did." "Then let HR prove it." "She tried to frame you. And they have evidence." "I can deal with her faster." Mara set down her tea. "That is exactly the problem." His face hardened. "I'm trying to protect you. You're trying to do something you're good at because this part is harder." "What part?" "Sitting here knowing you helped create it." Nico went still. Mara lowered her voice. "You knew Vivienne worked here. You knew she knew who I was. Then you slept with her anyway." "That was wrong." "Yes. I should have told you." "Yes," he exhaled. "Then tell me what you want." "I want the investigation to stay an investigation. I don't want her family threatened. I don't want her blacklisted from every company that owes you a favor." Nico said nothing. "And I don't want you using what she did today to make what you did at the Briar smaller." "I'm not." "You are every time you make her the whole problem." His eyes stayed on hers. Mara said it quietly. "She didn't promise me anything. You did." Nico looked away. Mara picked up her bag. That night, he did not come to her suite. At 10, one message appeared on her phone. Do you need anything? Mara answered, no. His reply came a few seconds later. Okay. The next morning, Lena called at 7. Nico Valenti came to my office before sunrise. Mara sat up in bed. Why? He changed the agreement. The residence requirement was gone. Mara could leave the estate immediately. Nico would still cover pregnancy and delivery expenses whether she stayed, separated, or filed for divorce. Her Meridian job was explicitly independent of the marriage. The agreement could not be used to pressure her in any future custody discussion. He signed already, Lena said. What does he get? Nothing. Mara found Nico in the library. The amended agreement sat beside a cup of coffee gone cold. You went to Lena before sunrise. Yes. She hates you. I noticed. Mara almost smiled. Why did you do it? Nico looked at the folder. I kept calling the first agreement fair because you negotiated it. You did. You also negotiated it while you were 23 weeks pregnant with 3 babies and living in a walk-up. Mara waited. If leaving me costs you your doctors, your job, your housing, or your sense that the babies are safe, then I don't get to call staying a choice. The word sounded difficult for him. That made Mara listen. He pushed the folder toward her. If you stay, I need to know you could have left. What do you want? Nico looked at her. You. Her face tightened. He shook his head once. I know, that doesn't buy me anything. Mara looked down at the papers. If I leave today, you leave. My doctors? Covered. My job? Yours. If I divorce you? His jaw tightened. Then you divorce me. You'd let me walk away. I hate the word let. Mara looked at him. Nico stayed where he was. You don't owe me another day. She picked up the folder. I'm taking this to Lena. I assumed you would. I'm not promising you anything. I know. Mara reached the door. Behind her, Nico said, I'm not asking you to forgive me. She looked back. I just took my hand off the door. Mara left with the papers. He did not follow. Mara did not move out that day. She took Nico's amended agreement to Lena and read every paragraph twice. Lena found no hidden penalty, custody trap, or clause tying Mara's work or medical care to the marriage. For 3 days, Mara kept living in the East Suite. Nico did not ask what she had decided. Katerina asked once. I haven't, Mara said. Then don't let anyone rush you. 3 days later, Paige sent one final photograph from Graham's office. It was a letter in Mara's mother's handwriting. The letter confirmed what the bank records had already begun to show. Mara's parents had created a trust for her before they died. Graham had been named temporary trustee. The withdrawals started less than 4 months after Mara moved into the Caldwell house. The records led through household expenses, Caldwell development, a tax bill, a property purchase, Paige's tuition, and legal fees. By Mara's 25th birthday, most of the cash was gone. The riverfront interest Graham had called a technical estate issue was one of the last valuable assets still attached to the trust. Mara called Lena. I want the accounting finished before he knows how much we have. It's already moving. And Paige? She helped you. That doesn't make her responsible for Graham's records. Good. The confrontation took place in Lena's office. Mara refused to go back to the Caldwell house. Graham arrived with an attorney. Elise came with him. Paige stayed away. Graham looked at the first statement and immediately started explaining. You don't understand how difficult those years were. Mara slid another page toward him. You took $48,000 6 months after my mother died. That paid household costs. I was 11. We fed you. We raised you. Mara placed another statement on top. This paid Caldwell Development's tax bill. Then another. This paid Paige's tuition. Graham's attorney put a hand on his arm. Graham ignored him. You were sisters. Mara looked at him. You told me I wasn't your daughter when you needed me to marry Nico. He looked away. Mara pushed her mother's letter across the table. Graham's face changed. You didn't rescue me, Mara said. You managed my money and spent it. Elise began to cry. I loved you. Mara looked at her for a long moment. I think part of you did. Elise covered her mouth. But you let him do this. Mara stood. I want the full accounting. Whatever can legally be recovered gets returned. After that, talk to Lena. Graham tried once more as she reached the door. If we hadn't taken you in, you would have gone into the system. Mara stopped. For a second, she remembered being 11 with 2 garbage bags of clothes beside a borrowed bed. Then she turned. You don't get to use that child as a receipt. She left. The rest went through lawyers. The Caldwell side eventually settled after Lena's forensic accountant matched trust withdrawals to business records. A substantial portion of the recoverable assets came back to Mara, and several questionable accounting entries were referred for further review. At Meridian, the investigation reached its own conclusion. The application archive showed Mara's design test had been accessed from Vivienne's department the morning after Mara submitted it. The prototype order followed. Badge records and corridor footage supported the assistant's statement. Vivienne was fired for harassment, abuse of authority, misuse of candidate work, and attempting to manufacture evidence of theft. Nothing in the termination record mentioned the briar. Mara wanted it that way. At 31 weeks, she began working mostly from the estate. At 33 weeks, her doctor stopped work completely. Mara argued. The doctor won. Nico heard about the restriction from Mara. Do you need anything changed in the house? He asked. A chair in the shower. He caught himself before answering. Would you like me to arrange one? Mara looked at him. Yes. At 34 weeks and 5 days, the contractions became regular. An ambulance took Mara to the hospital. Nico drove behind it. At the maternity unit, a nurse asked who Mara wanted in the delivery room. Through the glass, Nico stood in the hallway in his work shirt, no jacket, waiting. Mara looked at the nurse. Him. Nico came in and stayed near her head. He answered nothing for her. When Mara reached out her hand, he took it. 3 babies arrived within minutes of one another. 2 girls and 1 boy. Small and loud and healthy enough to make Mara cry from relief. The paternity report came later. Nico was their father. Mara read it once and set it on the bedside table. The smallest girl slept against her chest. You can hold her. Nico looked at the baby. You sure? Yes. He washed his hands and waited until Mara placed his daughter in his arms. The first weeks after delivery were mostly bottles, feeding charts, and sleep measured in pieces. Nico came when Mara asked. Sometimes he was useful, sometimes he brought the wrong bottle. Once he arrived in a $3,000 coat with spit up down the shoulder, and did not notice until Katerina laughed at him. 6 weeks after the babies came home, Mara moved out of the Valenti estate. Nico did not argue. She rented a townhouse 15 minutes away. Her name was on the lease. Her money paid the deposit. The largest bedroom became the nursery, and half the dining room became her design space. Nico came when invited. He learned bottles, diapers, and which cry belonged to which baby. He never used the emergency key Elias kept. One evening, Mara was too exhausted to see anyone. Nico called from outside the agreed routine and asked if he could come over. No, Mara said. A short pause. Okay, that was it. Nearly 4 months after the night at the Briar, Mara came home from Meridian and found Nico sitting on the nursery floor with their son asleep against his chest. Her first independent capsule had been approved that afternoon. The paperwork read, Mara Quinn, lead designer. Nico had stayed out of the meeting because she asked him to. He put the baby down carefully and picked up his coat. I should go. Mara followed him to the front door. I haven't forgotten what you did. I know. I may never forget it. I know. If it happens again, there isn't another conversation. There shouldn't be. Mara looked at her bare left hand. She had never put the wedding ring back on. I'm not moving back. I didn't ask you to. I know. Nico waited. Dinner tomorrow, Mara said. His expression changed slightly. Are you asking me? Yes. As your husband? Mara thought about it. No. Then as what? She opened the front door for him. As a man, I'm willing to know again. He nodded slowly. 7. Nico stepped outside. Mara started to close the door. Upstairs, one of the babies cried. Nico turned automatically. So did Mara. They looked at each other. Mara opened the door wider. 5 minutes. Nico came back inside. He waited for Mara to lead the way upstairs, and Mara left the door open behind them. If you stayed with Mara all the way to the end, Thank you for spending this time with us. If her story brought back a moment when you had to choose between holding on, walking away, or giving someone one more chance, share as much or as little as you feel comfortable sharing in the comments. Sometimes, one honest sentence from your life is exactly what another person needs to read. Thank you for being here.